Greetings from the Garden of Eden. This is another episode of my daily harvest. It's just about sunset right now, which is my favorite time to come out into the garden. It starts to cool off. It's got that beautiful sunset glow. Bugs are making their sounds. I can smell the smoke in the air from all of our cooking. We're grilling tonight and running the rocket stoves. We got a pretty big feast going on tonight. And I'm out here doing some harvesting, and the crop, or the food, the superfood actually, that I want to focus on for today's daily harvest episode is the Moringa plant. And the Moringa plant is, really cool. It's kind of all the rage these days in, sort of like superfood communities, raw food communities, sort of like the, new age, super healthy folk. And Moringa is actually a plant that I'm pretty sure originates in Africa. It grows natively there, I know that for sure. And it is one of the most nutritionally dense plants on the entire earth, meaning it's packed with nutrition. It has vast amounts of super nutrition in it. So they call it a superfood. So it's a big supplement. You buy it in bags, powdered, dried, dried forms most of the time, because you can't really get it raw almost anywhere. But it's a big rage these days for its healing and medicinal and nutrient-rich benefits. So I wanted to talk about this Moringa plant. It's really cool because we've got it here growing in the Garden of Eden. The seeds are really cool, and we happened to get some from a friend, and we planted this quite a few years ago. It does grow fairly well here. As you can see, it's pretty tall. It's about 10 feet tall right now. It'll get to at least 15 feet before the winter time comes. Now, because it's not a native plant here, and it does grow, like I said, like in Africa, as soon as we get a first freeze, it dies. So that's the one downside to it, is you can't really grow it nearly as successfully in any environment where you get a freeze, because it will die. But the good thing is that once it dies, you can literally cut down the whole plant, and not only are the leaves edible, but the stems are edible, the branches are edible, and the trunk is edible itself. So, the trunk and the stems are a little bit too hard to really just eat. You could chew on it and sort of just suck the nutrients out of it and spit out the, the fibrous mass. So you wouldn't really necessarily want to eat the trunks or the, or the stalks whole, but you could do it that way. What a lot of people will do is they'll sort of like powder it, and then they'll make a tea out of it. Or just cut it into rounds or something like that, and steep it in hot water and make a tea out of it. Or you add the powder to smoothies and things like that. But the whole plant, every bit of the plant, is edible. It's not really the best tasting plant. It's really quite bitter, but it's a super nutrient rich plant. So the reason why you eat it is because, not necessarily that it tastes good, but because it's super nutrient dense. And this, it has so much nutrients in it that, you could replace all sorts of, supplements, all sorts of vitamins, things like that. It's way more nutritious than even something like kale or spinach, or, some sort of green that most people think is, super healthy. So the Moringa is super cool. I won't list all the nutrition in the Moringa plant. Maybe in the post I'll, make a list of what its, properties are, or, what the nutrition content is and things like that. But it's super nutritious. You can eat the whole plant. Every bit of it is edible. It does die at the first freeze, but what we do is, as soon as it dies, we cut down the whole thing. We use the whole thing. We process the whole thing, store the whole thing, and then we mulch over the roots. So we cut it off at the ground, and then we mulch it over with, like a couple feet of mulch. And then what happens is that the roots actually survive underneath the ground. As long as you don't get like a ground freeze, which the mulch keeps from happening, the roots are still there. And then once the summertime comes, then it shoots up again. And so this, 10-foot plant right now is just the result of growing for, about 2 months. And it's going to grow at least another 5 feet or so before it dies in the wintertime. So you still can get a pretty good crop out of it. We are a pretty warm climate here in Texas, North Texas, but we do get freezes. We get hard freezes. So it does die, but it does fairly well. It's super nutritious. It's super easy to grow. It requires very little water. It's super heat tolerant. We're over 100-degree temperature days now here in the summertime. We don't get rain for weeks or even months on end sometimes. So a lot of crops are actually extremely difficult to grow this time of year. But this plant, it's not wilted at all. We've got all sorts of plants that are wilting, and turning brown and require tons of water. This plant requires very little water. It's super heat tolerant. It looks all vibrant and lush when many of the other plants are not. It's super nutritious, so I'm a big fan of it. I highly suggest trying to find some seeds. If you live in a climate where you might be able to grow it, plant it, harvest it, use it as a superfood. Replace some of your supplements. Upgrade your nutrition. It's a super wise investment. I'm all about preventative medicine. I'm all about natural medicine, and this is one of those perfect examples, because when your body is getting proper nutrition every day, you're not ever going to gain weight. You're not ever going to get fat. You're going to be stronger. You're going to have more energy. Your mind's going to be clearer. Everything about life is better when you're getting high nutrition content foods. And if you were to just eat this, once a day, a handful of it a day, or put it in a smoothie or things like that, you're going to be getting a lot more nutrition than what any of the average people on earth are getting on a regular basis, and you really will feel the difference. So I'm going to close out this episode of Daily Harvest. I hope that this was valuable to you. As always, I welcome your feedback and I appreciate your support. Steam on.